everyone. Welcome to the Good Projects professional development session about global citizenship. So in this session, we're going to talk a little bit more about what global citizenship means and how it can be defined, some practices that might help teach global citizenship, and also some frameworks that can help us think about what global citizenship can look like in action. So we know that today's world is filled with many different challenges, and these are probably all familiar to most of us. So we have trends like climate change that's affecting the world. Inequality is rising, particularly economic inequality in many places. There's conflict and warfare that's been very vivid over the past few years. There's been, in certain ways, trends that indicate maybe there's a backslide in democracy or in democratic decision making. And there's also the rise of new technologies like AI that are having an effect on how we differentiate truth from fiction and how we do our work and relate to one another. How is AI going to affect that? So these are challenges that we all wonder about, and it might sound a little bit doom and gloom to spell them all out, but the good news is that we're each called to respond to these challenges in various ways. So, as people have done across time and across history, when we see challenges or problems out there in the world, we meet those problems with our own actions and our own ways of responding to them and hopefully helping to make the world a better place. That can take many different forms. We can engage with our communities, we can help one another out, we can engage in a protest to make our voices heard, we can advocate for something. And when we think about all of those actions and all of the issues that we're facing today, teachers in schools are really on the front lines of helping young people and learners figure out what to do in response to current world events, how to live and to act in response. Young people, just because they're adolescents, they might not be adults in every sense of the word in many ways. They are also subject to the same pressures and the same challenges that we all are facing around the world. And so, thinking about how to give young people the tools and give learners the abilities, the skills to really be thinking about what they want to do and to feel empowered to respond to different challenges is really at the heart of what it means to be a global citizen. So, what is global citizenship? How can it be defined? So just beyond us being local citizens, maybe thinking about our community or national citizens, thinking about the nation states that we're all a part of, wherever we are in the globe, there's also this idea that citizenship can be global. So take a moment to consider how you yourself would define global citizenship. If you want to even pause, and if you're with others, you can talk. Or if you're by yourself, maybe just jot down a few thoughts. What is this term that we hear often in academia and also in the media, in different learning spaces? We hear global citizenship. What does that mean to you? And then once you've thought about that a bit, you can come back. So these are some student definitions of global citizenship from our research that the Good Project has done with a group called the Global Citizenship Initiative. And that is a group that brings together a set of basically around 30 high school students from around the world together each year to think about doing a local, or they call it a glocal, both global and local service project. And these are some of the words that bubbled to the surface for these young people when they hear global citizenship. So you can see here, unsurprisingly, the words global and world are really prevalent across the data set from 2022 and 23. You can see understanding is really big, humanity in 2023. So this sense of bringing people together, awareness, so a knowledge of particular issues, perhaps, interconnected differences. So it's interesting to see some of the threads that bubble to the surface here for these learners who were part of this community that we worked with and researched. Global citizenship, when we looked in the literature, is defined in a few different ways, and these are just two of the definitions that are out there that I thought would be particularly representative or helpful. So, the UN defines global citizenship as, quote, the umbrella term for social, political, environmental, and economic actions of globally minded individuals and communities on a worldwide scale. And then you have this article from the academic literature saying that global citizenship involves awareness, caring, and embracing cultural diversity while promoting social justice and sustainability, coupled with a sense of responsibility to act. So, having taken a look at these definitions and others, it seems like there are some common elements to different ways of thinking about global citizenship, and we put them together in this little framework called Visa, perhaps appropriately when thinking about global issues. So, this is the Visa framework of global citizenship. So, what does global citizenship involve? It involves, first of all, a commitment to certain values like cultural diversity, an openness to learning, perhaps. It involves information, or this could also be considered as issues as the word. So, a focus on particular topics like sustainability or social justice that are particularly important, challenges that we are facing as a world, but also in local ways. It involves a scale, so a knowledge of and an awareness of the worldwide nature of a lot of these issues. That's the global piece. And then finally, a commitment to action is this last A element. So, a commitment to act and do. It's not just enough to have certain values, be looking for information, or be aware of the scale of some of these issues, but also a commitment to act in response to them. So, what are some practices that can encourage global citizenship in a learning environment? These are some of the ideas, and there are many different ways to help promote global citizenship in students. So we might think about some of these bullets that I'll talk through just quickly, each one of them. There's project-based learning. So maybe that could look like students taking on a particular sense of what it could look like to actually have an impact in a local community or in a local way by doing a local impact project. There's service learning and volunteering similarly, looking for the local manifestations of particular global issues, maybe volunteering to help alleviate some of the challenges that they see out there. There's personal reflection and values exploration, maybe having students clarify what are the values that I hold and how do those show up in certain ways in thinking about what it means to engage with my communities or to be thinking on a more global scale. So that could look like maybe thinking about cultural diversity or open-mindedness in certain ways. Integrating current issues into the curriculum is really an important way to get students thinking about current events. Again, promoting skills or dispositions like open-mindedness, empathy, and also critical thinking as a skill. So, how to sort through different sources of information, how to make sense of complex issues, incorporating diverse perspectives. So, not just having a one-track mind about certain issues, but making sure that we expand our lens. And then discussion-based pedagogy, which I'll just talk a little bit about. That could look like something in diverse groups and diverse classrooms with a practice like Harkness. So Harkness is a discussion-based pedagogy style that has been studied in different environments by the Good Project, including in the Global Citizens Initiative that I mentioned, in which students are really leaders of the discussion and teachers or educators are more of equal partners, helping to moderate at most. So students are really the ones taking the lead and having the discussion, sitting around a table together, looking at one another, and really listening to what one another has to or have to share, looking at one another's body language, figuring out how each of them can contribute to the discussion, and usually analyzing something, and that could be a book, an article, it could be any particular artifact that might be about something like a global issue to really help cultivate global citizenship awareness, and students explore their own curiosities. So, a reason why Harkness could be particularly helpful for global citizenship education is because It allows students to build on their funds of knowledge, to build and to bring their own perspectives, building on one another to the discussion. Funds of knowledge is an idea from this group of scholars who are cited here on the slide, and they define funds of knowledge as the historically accumulated and culturally developed bodies of knowledge and skills essential for household or individual functioning and well-being. So it's essentially this idea that what students know from their background and their communities and their experiences is really an asset that can be brought to the classroom. And in a practice like Harkness, you can see students have the opportunity to actively practice perspective taking and open-mindedness that are really foundational to thinking about what it means to act and to live as a global citizen. What I outlined is definitely not the only set of ideas or practices or sets of skills that are related to global citizenship. So this would be a great moment to pause and to think based on what I've talked about, what kinds of practices have been most effective with your own students or your own learners in promoting aspects of global citizenship. So thinking about the values that are implicit in global citizenship, the issues that we might want to have students thinking about, or the information they need, the global scale of some of these challenges, and then the actions that they can take. What practices do you think or have you seen are most effective? So take a moment to pause here, think about that for a bit, or have a conversation with your colleagues. So going a little bit deeper now that we've had a chance to think about what global citizenship is and looks like, I want to hone in or zoom in a little bit on that action piece, the final part of this little framework that we've put together about global citizenship, and really consider this question. So what does action look like? There are a number of possible actions that students and actually all of us take when we're dealing with issues in the world. We might decide to volunteer about something we care about. We can donate time, resources. We might protest if our political environment allows it. We might raise our voices in certain ways or raise awareness on social media, trying to have an effect where we might influence other people. Or we could even maybe invent something, like engage in social entrepreneurship or create something new that might meet a need or help confront a challenge. But considering all of these actions and more, it's important to think about what it really means to make a difference and how do we think about all of these different actions and pathways together? How do we help young people, adolescents, and really all of us make sense of what it means to take action in the world? How do we think about the best ways that we should be going about that? What's going to work in particular circumstances? So you can pause again to have a conversation or to take some time to think, how do you think your students should take action given all of these different ways of making a difference in the world as global citizens? And how do you envision your role as an educator in their efforts? Once you've thought about that a little bit, I'm proposing these different, I guess, trade-off scenarios as a way to maybe help push thinking further. So in some of our research that the Good Project has done with the United Road Colleges, we tried to really hone in on how people were thinking about the most effective ways of making a difference, trying to come down to a little bit more specificity than maybe people's first immediate reactions often provided. And so these types of trade-offs or little scenarios can help us think a little bit more, what does making a difference really mean to me? So if you had to choose, which of the following actions feels like a better way to make a difference in the world? Would it be taking stock of one's role in contributing to the growth of global warming, or becoming a researcher who considers questions like how important is climate change compared to health? So I will have you think about that little scenario and then move us on to another one. If you had to choose between these two options, which feels like a better way to you of making a difference in the world? Finding a career where you can give money to effective causes like education, or starting a new company focused on online education. So is it better to maybe seek a career and give some of your resources, or better to start your own company in online education? And then finally, helping to create innovations that will help society adapt to new challenges, or making yourself an example of how to adapt to new challenges and hoping others might follow in your footsteps. What feels more effective to you and why? So again, the reason why I presented these scenarios is oftentimes we might come up with definitions of making a difference, like, I just think anyone should make an impact in any way they can, as long as we're all trying to make the world a little better. That can feel kind of vague or a little bit non-specific, and hopefully the little trade-off scenarios I provided might help push your thinking a little further in certain directions, thinking, no, you know what, I really do think that maybe it is making sure that I devote my resources in a certain direction to a cause that I care about, can be more important than acting as an example in day-to-day life, for example, or the other way around. And the reason why it's important to think about this is because we can think about frameworks that can help students actually really know and come to understand what it looks like to actually be doing social impact or engaging in social impact. So instead of being a little bit vague and just saying make an impact, there are different ways and different frameworks we can think about what making an impact looks like to help provide students with choices or ways to spark their thinking. And I want to state, first of all, that these paradigms I'm going to talk about and the frameworks of social impact I'm talking about are definitely not the only options and are not 100% complete. So there are other ways to make an impact that are not represented in these frameworks, but it's, I think, thinking through how to help make frameworks or make options for young people that can help push their thinking in new directions. So when we did our research with the United World Colleges network of schools, these were four of the most frequent ways that people talked about making an impact that we distilled from our conversations and interviews. First, the idea of having a ripple effect. So hopefully a cascade of some sort, for example, by sharing a social media post or telling other people in your life about a certain issue, a certain maybe challenge that was facing the globe, that you would have the ability to spread within networks. So by telling one other person, maybe they would go on and tell somebody else, and ultimately we would see that that was enough to make a change. There was also this idea of change through charity, oftentimes linked to effective altruism. So by giving some of my resources, whether that's money, time, other resources like physical goods, through to some charity cause, that it would have a necessary result at making the world better. There's the idea of crafting a new culture, this third quadrant here. So things like social entrepreneurship, really having the ability to create something new, a movement, maybe a product, maybe a new design or way of doing things that would have a positive effect. And then finally, the idea of looking at root causes or engaging in systems thinking, having a deeper look than maybe giving money to charity to alleviate some of the end causes of an issue, trying to look more upstream and thinking about, okay, what's going on here systemically and how can we address some of the maybe more larger scale or more complex and interconnected challenges that people were facing. And then secondly, we also used this model of citizen action and thinking about how people can make an impact in the world. So here are kind of the shorthand on the left definitions of some of these ways of thinking about what citizen action can look like, and maybe some examples of what it looks like in practice. So the idea of being a helpful hand to other people, maybe like I described, donating to charity or drawing on some relationships to help others. Being an activist ally, so finding a way to look at more root causes and engaging more systemic thinking, what we would call a benevolent benefactor, so maybe taking more of a leadership role and helping to address global citizenship issues or global problems. Being someone who's personally responsible, so maybe on a smaller scale, looking at that one-to-one, kind of doing what you can as a person, and then in your immediate surroundings, how you affect others. There's also this idea of being resigned. So someone who hopes for systemic change or hopes for some type of change in the system that's going to make it better, but feeling a little bit cynical or defeated that real change can never come. That was something that we didn't see too often or too high a percentage of people in our research, but was still there as something we were aware of, and hopefully is something we can help to change people's perspectives about a little bit, even when engaging in citizen action or social impact work can sometimes feel a little bit challenging itself. So, wrapping up from some of these frameworks that we think could be really helpful in actually discussing and thinking about with learners of all sorts together to give them a way to think about what it means to do social action or be a global citizen. There are many ways to think about making a difference. The paradigms I just shared are not the only way to think about these topics, but are one way. We'd love to learn from you about other ways that you think about making a difference. And then some implications of this presentation overall are to provide students with opportunities to practice global citizenship, build on maybe your existing practices or pedagogy, and maybe try out new ones or new ways of thinking about how to integrate global citizenship into your daily routines. And then try to make social impact and action understandable and specific instead of being this big monolith like we're going to do good in the world in whatever ways and not really being specific about it. There are ways that we can break down what that looks like, and hopefully ways that are more understandable and might help students be more specific and more action oriented and effective. And then just a thank you that this workshop or session built upon two separate lines of research that the Good Project had completed, as I've referenced with our friends at the Global Citizens Initiative and at the United World Colleges. Thank you so much for your interest and for tuning into the session.